Ireland, the Emerald Isle, is a name that stirs emotion, history, and pride. But have you ever stopped to ask where that name truly came from? Ireland wasn't always what this land was called. Long before English words ever touched its soil, this island had names rooted in myth, nature, and language far older than modern Europe itself. The name Ireland traces back thousands of years to the ancient Gaelic word Éire, which itself came from Ériu, the name of a powerful goddess in Irish mythology. Ériu wasn't just a figure of legend. She represented the spirit of the island, its fertility, its strength, and its sovereignty. When early settlers and later Celtic tribes looked upon this lush land, they saw her presence in every hill and river. Even before the Celts, the island was known in fragments of early Greek and Roman records as Éire, Ivernia, or Hibernia. Each version carried echoes of the same ancient root. Over centuries, as languages changed and invaders arrived, Éire evolved into Ireland, but its heart remained the same. This is the story of how a land's sacred name survived time, empire, and translation, and what it still means today. Before it was Ireland, before the name Ireland ever existed, the island was known by ancient names that reflected how its early people understood their world. They didn't see their land as just territory. They saw it as sacred, alive, and filled with meaning. One of the earliest names recorded in Old Irish tradition is Inis File, meaning Island of Destiny. The word file refers to the Lia File, the Stone of Destiny, a legendary coronation stone said to cry out when the rightful High King of Ireland touched it. This stone, kept at Tara, the seat of ancient Irish kings, symbolized divine approval to rule. To call their land Inis File was to say it was chosen, a place set apart by destiny. Another ancient name, and perhaps the most important, was Ériu. According to Irish mythology, Ériu was a goddess, one of three sisters, along with Banba and Fodla. When the Milesians, the mythic ancestors of the Irish people, arrived on the island, these goddesses greeted them. Each asked that the land be named after her. The Milesians agreed, but it was Ériu's name that endured. Over time, her name became Éire, which is still what the Irish call their country in their own language today. These myths weren't just stories, they reflected how the early Irish viewed their home. They saw the island as feminine, protective, and sacred. A mother figure, providing life and identity. The goddess Ériu represented sovereignty, meaning that every rightful ruler had to respect the spirit of the land itself. Centuries later, when foreign tongues began recording Ireland's name, they found it already ancient, older than Latin or English. From Ériu came Éire, and from Éire came Ireland. Long before politics or nations, the island had already named itself, through myth, faith, and reverence for the land. The goddess behind the name. To understand why the island was named after Ériu, we have to look closer at who she was and what she represented to the early Irish. In Celtic belief, gods and goddesses were not distant beings in the sky. They were living forces in nature. Ériu was more than a myth. She was the spirit of the island itself. She embodied fertility, prosperity, and sovereignty, the right to rule that came not from conquest, but from harmony with the land. In ancient Irish coronation rituals, kings were said to marry the land. This wasn't symbolic romance. It was a sacred bond. By doing so, a king showed respect to Ériu, the goddess of the soil, rivers, and mountains, promising to rule justly and protect the island's people. If he failed, the land itself was believed to turn against him. Linguists trace Éire's name back to the ancient Proto-Celtic word Éiriu, meaning fertile land or land of abundance. This root is older than written history, and remarkably, it appears across Europe. Early Greek geographers called the island Éire or Ivernia, while Roman writers later recorded it as Hibernia. Each of these names is a linguistic echo of Ériu, proof that long before modern borders, Ireland was already recognized as a distinct and thriving land. In Irish mythology, Éiriu's sisters Banba and Fodla were honored too. Poets sometimes use their names as poetic substitutes for Ireland itself, a reminder that the island had multiple layers of identity. But Ériu's name became the heart of it all, enduring across generations. So when people today say Éire or Ireland, they are unknowingly speaking the name of an ancient goddess, one who symbolized the soul of the land. Her name outlasted kingdoms, languages, and empires, carried quietly through the ages by the people who refused to forget the spirit that gave their island its name. The coming of the Celts. Long before written history, Ireland was already home to advanced farming communities. These early people built monuments like Newgrange, a passage tomb older than the Egyptian pyramids, and perfectly aligned with the rising sun at winter solstice. They left behind no written language, but their stone carvings and sacred sites showed deep spiritual respect for the land. By the time the Celtic tribes began arriving from mainland Europe around 500 BCE, Ireland was already steeped in ritual and tradition. The Celts brought with them new languages, social structures, and beliefs, but instead of erasing the past, they blended it with what they found. The Celtic tongue evolved into Old Irish, the ancestor of modern Irish Gaelic. In this language, they called the island Ériu, honoring the goddess who represented the land's spirit. As centuries passed, Ériu became Éire, pronounced roughly Éire. What's fascinating is that Éire wasn't just a word, it was an identity. For the Celts, language, land, and spirituality were inseparable. The island wasn't defined by borders or kings, but by shared reverence for its soil, rivers, and myths. Calling their homeland Éire connected them to something greater, a living goddess, a source of belonging. When Christianity and later invaders arrived, the Celtic worldview adapted, but never disappeared. Even now, you can still feel echoes of it in Irish poetry, songs, and the deep connection many people have to the land. The Celtic arrival helped solidify Éiriu's name as the island's own. Through their oral traditions, songs, legends, and heroic tales, the name Éire became woven into daily life. They passed it from storyteller to storyteller, generation to generation. So when we speak of Ireland today, we're using a name that first came alive in Celtic mouths, a name that carried not just geography, but spirit. Long before maps or kingdoms, Éire was the heartbeat of a people who saw their land not as property, but as sacred home. The Latin connection, Hibernia. When the Roman Empire expanded across Europe, it mapped nearly every corner of the known world. Yet Ireland, lying across the sea from Roman Britain, remained a mystery. The Romans never conquered it, but they knew it existed. Traders, sailors, and soldiers spoke of a green island rich in resources and fierce independence. Roman geographers gave it a new name, Hibernia. This term first appeared in classical texts around the 1st century BCE. It was the Latinized form of Ivernia, or Ierne, words the Greeks had used earlier, derived from the same Celtic root as Ériu. But the Romans made a small mistake. They thought the name came from their own Latin word hibernus, meaning winterly or cold. To them, Hibernia was the land of winter, a remote and chilly place at the edge of the world. Though the name was based on misunderstanding, it reflected how distant and mysterious Ireland seemed to outsiders. To the Romans, Hibernia was a land beyond empire, unconquered and untamed. Yet despite never ruling it, they traded with it. Roman artifacts, coins, glass, and jewelry have been found in Irish soil, proof of contact and exchange. Still, Hibernia was a foreign label. It appeared in Roman maps and chronicles, but the Irish themselves never used it. Within the island, the name Éire, the legacy of Ériu, remained alive and unchanged. The monks who later recorded Irish history in Latin used Hibernia for the scholarly world, but always paired it with Éire in their own tongue. So Hibernia stands as a bridge, a Latin echo of Éire, filtered through ancient misunderstanding yet preserving the same root. It shows how even outsiders recognize the island's distinct identity. To Europe, it was Hibernia, the far green edge of the known world. But to its people, it was still Éire, a sacred name carried in their language, their myths, and their hearts. Christianity and the name Éire. By the 5th century, Ireland stood at a turning point. The island had never fallen under Roman rule, yet Roman influence arrived in another way, through Christianity. Missionaries like St. Patrick, Palladius, and others brought the Christian faith to Irish shores, and with it came Latin literacy, monastic life, and the written word. For the first time, Ireland's ancient stories, genealogies, and myths were recorded on parchment by monks who wrote in both Latin and Old Irish. These early scholars preserved the island's traditions rather than destroying them, a rare act in early medieval Europe. They copied old myths and legends into Christian manuscripts, making Ireland one of the few places where pagan heritage survived the coming of the Church. In these writings, Éire continued to appear. When monks wrote in Latin, they used the word Hibernia to communicate with Europe's learned world. But in their own language, they still said Éire. This dual naming, Latin abroad, Gaelic at home, became a pattern that lasted for centuries. The Lebor Gabála Éireann, or Book of Invasions, written by Irish monks between the 11th and 12th centuries, tells how the goddess Ériu gave her name to the land. The text blends myth and history, showing how deeply Éire was tied to Irish identity, not just as a word, but as a symbol of continuity. Through these centuries, Ireland became known as the island of saints and scholars. Its monasteries produced illuminated manuscripts like the Book of Kells and educated much of Christian Europe. Yet even in this golden age of learning, Éire remained a sacred word. It stood for home, for faith, and for heritage. Christianity changed Ireland's faith, but it didn't erase its soul. The monks carried Éiriu's name into written history, ensuring that when the rest of Europe spoke of Hibernia, the Irish would still whisper Éire, the living name of their island, born from both legend and belief. The English arrive, from Éire to Ireland. By the early Middle Ages, Ireland had already built a rich identity rooted in Éire, its ancient name, language, and culture. But by the 8th and 9th centuries, waves of Vikings began raiding and later settling in coastal towns like Dublin, Waterford, and Limerick. These Norse settlers traded, intermarried, and introduced new words into Irish life, but they never replaced the native name Éire. The real transformation came later, in the 12th century, with the arrival of the Normans, Anglo-Norman forces from England and Wales. They brought with them a new language, Old English, which would begin reshaping how the outside world referred to the island. In Old English, the word Ireland emerged. It combined Éire, meaning Irishmen or Irish people, with land, forming Ireland or land of the Irish. The word Éire itself was borrowed from the Old Norse form of Éire, showing how interconnected these influences had become. By the late medieval period, Ireland evolved into Ireland, the name we recognize today. The English added their familiar suffix land, following the same pattern as Scotland, land of the Scots, or England, land of the Angles. It was an English interpretation of an older Irish truth, a linguistic adaptation of Éire. However, language always carries power. As England extended its political control over Ireland, the name Ireland became tied to colonization. It appeared in official titles like the Lordship of Ireland after 1171 under King Henry II, and later the Kingdom of Ireland in 1542 under Henry VIII. Yet through all this, Éire survived in the Irish language, quietly, stubbornly, and proudly. While Ireland became the name of empire and administration, Éire remained the name of the heart. This chapter of naming tells a deeper story, not just of translation, but of endurance. Even as English rulers and Norman lords imposed their versions, the native Irish tongue kept Éiriu's legacy alive, proof that a nation's soul cannot be renamed. Politics, identity, and names. As Ireland moved through the late medieval and early modern ages, its name became more than geography. It became a statement of power, belonging, and resistance. The English crown viewed Ireland as a territory to control, while the Irish saw Éire as a sacred inheritance that could never truly be taken. In 1171, King Henry II of England declared himself Lord of Ireland, marking the start of centuries of English rule. Later, in 1542, Henry VIII redefined it again as the Kingdom of Ireland, aligning it under the English crown. These names were political tools, titles designed to claim authority over a people who never surrendered their identity. Under English administration, Ireland became the formal name used in law, treaties, and governance. But in homes, songs, and stories, the Irish language and the name Éire endured. It was an act of quiet defiance. To speak Irish, to say Éire, was to keep the old spirit alive. As centuries passed, Ireland's struggle for independence became tied to its name. In poetry and rebellion alike, Éire and Éireann, a poetic form of Éire, appeared again and again, symbols of a nation that refused to forget itself. You see it in slogans like Éireann go brach, Ireland forever, which became a rallying cry for Irish pride. When the Irish Free State was born in 1922, and later when the country declared itself a republic in 1949, the dual identity of the island was formally recognized. Éire in Irish, Ireland in English. Both names were correct, one rooted in the language of the land, the other shaped by history's turbulence. Today, this coexistence tells a powerful story. Ireland represents how the island speaks to the world. Éire represents how it speaks to itself. Together, they remind us that names are not just labels. They are living bridges between past and present, carrying memory, struggle, and pride across generations. The meaning beneath the word. Every name holds a story, and Ireland carries one of the richest of all. Beneath its familiar English form lies the heartbeat of an ancient world, the voice of Ériu, the goddess of the land, and the echo of generations who called this island home long before history was written down. At its root, the name Ireland still means the land of Ériu. Linguists trace the name through a long linguistic chain, from Proto-Celtic Ériu to Old Irish Ériu, to modern Irish Éire, and finally to the English Ireland. Though each version sounds different, they all share the same soul, a connection to the earth, abundance, and identity. That's what makes the name so powerful. It's not just a geographic label, it's a word layered with myth, faith, and endurance. When someone says Ireland, they're unknowingly invoking a name that has survived invasions, famines, and centuries of foreign rule. For the Irish, the name is a living reminder of their relationship with the land. It speaks of rivers that still bear ancient names, of green fields once walked by druids and monks, and of a people whose identity grew from hardship, yet remained unbroken. Even today, both Éire and Ireland are used officially, appearing side by side on passports, coins, and government documents. The Irish Constitution of 1937 formally declared Éire as the Irish language name of the state and Ireland as its English equivalent. That duality reflects the country's reality, rooted in Gaelic heritage, yet engaged with the wider world. So when we say Ireland, we are not just naming a place on a map. We are calling on a history that began in myth, grew through conquest, and endured through faith. It's a single word that carries the memory of a goddess, the resilience of a people, and the quiet strength of a land that refused to lose its name. The poetry of a names can outlive empires, and in Ireland's case, the name itself became poetry, a thread woven through centuries of pride, exile, and longing. For the Irish, Éire, Éireann, and Ireland are not just linguistic variations. They are emotional tones that capture different eras of the nation's soul. When the Irish began emigrating in great numbers during the 19th century famine, they carried their homeland's name across oceans. In faraway places like Boston, New York, and Sydney, they spoke of Éire and Éireann, not as political entities but as beloved memories. In songs like Éireann go brach, meaning Ireland forever, the name became a declaration of faith and endurance. It comforted millions who never saw their island again, a reminder that home was still alive in language and song. Poets, too, kept the old names alive. Writers such as Thomas Moore and W.B. Yeats used Éireann to stir emotion, connecting readers to Ireland's mythic past. Yeats once wrote that Ireland was a terrible beauty, a phrase that captured how the island's pain and poetry were intertwined. Even before modern independence, nationalists invoked Éire as a sacred word. Rebels in 1916 proclaimed an Irish republic using the name Poblacht na Hérian, the Republic of Éire. Their declaration tied the modern dream of freedom back to the island's oldest identity. Across time, Éire and Ireland have danced together, one representing the soul, the other the face the world sees. Yet both carry a rhythm of belonging. To call yourself Irish is, in a way, to belong to Ériu herself, the mother goddess whose name still flows through the nation's veins. That is the poetry of it, a single word that connects mythology, exile, rebellion, and pride. It reminds the Irish that no matter how far they travel, their country's name, whispered, sung, or printed, is a living bridge to who they are and where they come from. The spirit of Ériu lives on today. When we say Ireland, we're saying more than a country's name. We're speaking a story thousands of years old. Few places on earth can trace their name to a goddess, but Ireland can. Ériu, the ancient spirit of the land, gave her name to this island. And through wars, colonization, and changing tongues, that name never died. From Ériu to Éire, from Hibernia to Ireland, the word has shifted shape but never lost its soul. It's more than a label, it's identity. Every version carries a piece of the same truth. This island was, and always will be, sacred ground. Its name survived not because of rulers or maps, but because the people refused to forget it. Even today, the name Ireland holds that quiet strength. You can feel it in its landscapes, in the mist over Connemara, the cliffs of Moher, the green hills that roll endlessly toward the sea. The name reminds us that this land's story isn't just written in history books. It's alive in the wind, in the songs, and in the hearts of its people. So why is Ireland called Ireland? Because its name was born from myth, preserved through faith, and carried by love. To say Ireland is to speak the voice of Ériu, the goddess who still watches over her island. If this story moved you, take a moment to subscribe and join us as we uncover more forgotten histories, myths, and meanings.